You're live, Jimmy.
Hi, everybody. Welcome back to the stream over on Rumble. Rumble time. By the way, we're going to be doing some new shows called Rumble Time. They're going to be live with a live studio audience, and we're going to try to get some fun people. Anyway, you know that.
Yeah, those live shows are a good time.
Rumble has given us the go-ahead. They're going to give us some money to do that, so that's all fantastic. Ready? All right, so we have a special guest with us. Dr. David E. Martin is the founder and owner of the company MCAM International, which has provided research and corporate advisory services to over 160 countries, while he has personally served as an advisor to the World Bank and many governments. Dr. Martin first arose to global attention when he appeared in the August 2020 documentary Plandemic Indoctrination. He is also a Batten Fellow at the University of Virginia's Darden Graduate School of Business Administration. Welcome to the show, Dr. David E. Martin.
Jimmy, it's a delight to be here.
Okay, I wanted to show you this because you've been doing some great work on the history of the COVID-19 vaccine and the patents that go back way further than anybody imagines. But before we get into that, I just wanted to show you this. I came across this. Back in the day, they tried to tell you about vaccines. And this is the mainstream news media. Now, this was before 1997 when Bill Clinton made it okay for pharmaceutical companies to basically buy off the news media. So we used to have 50 giant news companies. Yep. Bill Clinton, through the Telecommunications Act in 1996, took us from 50 giant news companies down to 6. And then they allowed pharmaceutical companies to advertise directly to consumers. There's only 2 countries in the whole world that do that, the United States and New Zealand, and they were the worst at COVID, right? And the mandates.
That's exactly right. Yep.
Yeah.
Well, maybe they just want to tell customers about prescription drugs they should tell their doctor to give them.
So what they're doing, so you have to remember, just like when Boeing does an ad for NBC News, nobody's in the market to buy a 727 or what. But what they're doing is they're not funding the investigation of the news media. They're funding their non-investigation. So they're saying, hey, Correct. If you say anything bad about us, we're going to take our money away. Same thing with Big Pharma, which is why everybody was misled. But look at what they used to say before Big Pharma was allowed to buy the news media. Watch this.
Today, doctors at the Federal Communicable Disease Center acknowledge the flu vaccine and the recommended dosage is ineffective. While in a larger dose, it can be harmful. However, the flu vaccine is still recommended for old people and the chronically ill.
Last month, a Senate subcommittee headed by Abraham Ribicoff charged that the federal government wasn't doing a good enough job of informing the public about ineffective vaccines.
Scientists at the Division of Biologic Standards test vaccines for their potency and safety before licensing them for public use. However, the division does not determine the effectiveness of the vaccine. That is left to the manufacturers. A case in point is the influenza vaccine. 4 scientists in charge of work on the flu vaccine during the 1960s found it to be ineffective, said they refused to give it to their own families. 2 were transferred to other work, a 3rd left the division. And over the entire 10-year period, not one word of their unfavorable findings was allowed to be published. But a more serious case involving the relationship between the leaders of the division and their scientists involves the adenovirus vaccine, a vaccine given to thousands of American soldiers to prevent certain cold-like symptoms. When it was shown that the vaccine contained a contaminant which caused cancer in laboratory animals, it was taken off the market.
That the vaccine contained a contaminant which caused cancer.
But that was 3 years after the division's own scientists had pointed out the danger. Dr. Murray justifies the use of the vaccine by saying it took 3 years to examine the evidence against it.
It was more important to use the vaccines than to take them off the market and remove the agent.
Better sorry than safe.
Than to take them off the market and remove the agent.
But since the agent couldn't be removed, there was no other course.
Thus, for 3 years, American troops were injected with a cold-preventing vaccine which was causing cancer in laboratory animals. Some of the division's scientists who charged they were prevented from publishing results of experiments which show some of the vaccines to be ineffective.
The control officer in 1960 who has grave doubts about the potency of influenza vaccine. These doubts were made known to the director of the division and through the proper channels.
So
I didn't know those were even that old, the flu shots.
So yes, so
Oh yeah.
So now that's when the news media wasn't bought by Big Pharma.
Yeah.
And now we know what happened. But do you think anything has changed with Big Pharma and the doctors and the scientists? Has anything changed internally?
No, Jimmy, and it's worth noting. I mean, I saw it in your intro. I thought it was interesting. I used to be on CNBC and I used to be on Bloomberg. And one of the things that was interesting when I was on CNBC was, I don't know if you remember, but once upon a time, we were worried about the opioid crisis.
Yes.
that was killing people, hundreds of thousands of people across the country, millions of people around the world. And ironically, I pointed out that Purdue Pharmaceuticals was patenting a non-addictive formula for the opioid drugs that they were selling so that no one could produce them, so that the only drugs that could be produced were addictive. So they patented the non-addictive forms, kept them from the market. And I spent 18 months on the editorial meetings at CNBC from 2016 to 2018 trying to get that story told. But apparently, that was not a newsworthy story. It wasn't a newsworthy story to say that while we had get ready for this, we had a declared pandemic, we had a declared emergency use authorization for anything we could do to actually deal with the opioid crisis. But the company that was making the drugs filed patents on the non-addictive formulas so that no one could produce them. And for 2 years, the CNBC editorial board told me that story couldn't run because it wasn't newsworthy. I did exactly the same thing in the late 2010s when the EpiPen scandal broke, when a new executive came along and wanted to price the EpiPen at $40,000 a dose. That's for every child that needs that EpiPen out on the soccer field. They wanted that to be a $40,000 a dose administration. And I suggest it was unethical because I figured if your kid's on a soccer field, you shouldn't have to choose between your mortgage and saving your kid's life. I thought that was crazy. And CNBC once again told me that story couldn't run. So what I did was I wrote an op-ed, and because the op-ed got so much traction, CNBC ultimately published my op-ed as the official story that broke the EpiPen scandal. But don't think for a minute this is unique to vaccines. There are literally hundreds of cases where we have pharmaceutical companies, to your point, that bought news coverage so that the news would not be told. And in the case of the opioid addiction, as you know, now the family, conveniently with the patriarch of the family dead, we're now finding out that Purdue Pharmaceutical was a corrupt company, but they literally are responsible, no kidding, for hundreds of thousands of deaths across this country. And they would not do the story. CNBC to this day will not do the story on the non-addictive patents for opioid drugs.
Yeah, so, what drug is that? So it's an opioid that's not addictive. Someone actually made that? It's not like it was fentanyl. It turns out it is addictive or something, right? It was a.
Oh no! This is actually legitimately. They filed patents on all the non-addictive formulas so that no one could produce them.
So there's no such thing as that.
It doesn't exist, is what you're saying. It just exists in a formula. No one's made it. I had no idea
you could even make something like that.
So
yeah, you can, and it's illegal to produce because Purdue Pharma patented it and blocked it from the market.
And so, why have I never heard this story? Why do I have to have you come on the show for us to? No one else has covered. Has anybody else covered this?
No one has covered this story ever. No one has ever covered it.
Dippy liberals that at least know Purdue Pharma is bad. They think of like Pfizer's great. Purdue Pharma, they all saw the Netflix document, all the various docs. That information I've never heard from any of those.
I've never heard. It's not in that. It's not in they did a documentary on Purdue and all the opioid crisis.
Never, Jimmy, never once has this story been ever publicized, despite 2 years of me recommending to the CNBC editorial board that we cover it, and not once was it covered.
And so what is that like when you are you in a meeting when you recommend it, or you do it through email? So what happens at the meeting?
No, I'm sitting up in New Jersey at the headquarters of CNBC, and I'm told that you can't have these conversations because advertisers will not approve running these kind of stories.
And that's that.
I'm still blown away that's a technology that exists.
I'm blown away too.
I guess I see why they wouldn't
Well, it makes me
want you to tell
excited
people.
because now I want to go do opioids that I know they're out there that I can go get my.
Don't do the most illegal kind there are that aren't addictive. What? That's crazy, man.
I was.
Is there a name of it, or is just a like a molecule chain or something? And it's
no,
not-
these are all patented formulas. Yeah, there's a bunch of molecules that specifically make the opioid non-addictive. But you don't know about them, and nobody knows about them because apparently it's not newsworthy. So why don't we move on to something like, I don't know, somebody's clothes falling off because it's a it's a wardrobe failure because that's newsworthy, but killing people, not really newsworthy.
Well, you have to understand these people, they're also concerned about overpopulation. So a lot of stuff, there's a synergy here.
Kind of just fits together.
You know? That's one of the main problems. There's too many people, and we got to find new ways.
So I'm going to show you now. I want to show you. They have ads for the booster. Now, I don't know if you've seen these, but I'm going to go to Steph for a second so I can set this up.
Okay, here we go, ladies and gentlemen. Some of your super chats and Rumble rants. Dr. Drew rated the stream. Thanks, Dr. Drew. Lucy, love to see Ryan Dawson on to talk about 9/11, JFK, and Israel. Carl, thank you, Carl. It says Connex, too. Cornpop, the bad dude, tell me if it is coincidence that all these tequila companies that these rich assholes are investing in are in a cartel territory, and SS will be back. Back to Jimmy.
So I just want to remind people, because this got reported, but nowhere near the amount of press it should have gotten. The two top people who were at the FDA's vaccine, oversaw the vaccine department at the FDA, worked there for 30 years, resigned over the boosters. Here's the headline. Two top FDA officials resigned over the Biden administration's booster shot plan, saying it insisted on the policy before the agency approved it. So what they're saying is there wasn't any science. The FDA didn't apply, but the Biden administration pressured the FDA to approve it. And the FDA, I guess, apparently was going to go along with it. And so these people resigned, and then they went along with it. So then they put in Toti. So
they were
here,
there 30 years.
They were there 30 years.
So imagine the corruption that didn't make them leave until this.
Until
They're
this.
like, you got to at least fake that we approved it.
So Political and Endpoints reported that they left in frustration over Biden's COVID-19 booster shot plan. They led the FDA office in charge of approval. So it was Marion Gruber and Philip Krause. Did you know about this story?
Yeah, and it's amazing. It's like when the World Health Organization pulled remdesivir back in Ebola trials in 2018 because it was unethical, because it was killing 53% of the population into which it was injected. And it's amazing when you have these amazing ethical breaches where at some point, I guess, I don't know, if you were part of a booster program at the FDA for a thing that does not do any public health service, you wonder where the ethical line lives in your mind, because obviously you've been going along with the nonsense for a while. But the fact of the matter is, in this particular case, what people are starting to realize is the FDA is potentially now culpable for criminal conspiracy and antitrust violations. And so I think they're leaving because there's RICO charges that might be coming. I don't think they're leaving because they have a conscience.
Wow.
Oh, really? Okay. Well, see, here's what I say about Dr. Fauci, right? And these people who all, and Collins and the woman who was the head of the CDC, they can lie with impunity and lie with impunity to Congress because the same people who own them also own the government who are supposed to be prosecuting them. Right. So if you lie at the behest of the establishment, which is what Fauci did when he lied and said that they weren't funding gain of function, he was doing it at the behest of the Pentagon. He was and DARPA. And so so the CIA, the FBI, he's doing that at the behest of the establishment. And those people don't work for the American people. They work for those. So they'll never be. So you're saying you think that's how would that happen? How would the government decide to start prosecuting these people who were lying?
Well,
go ahead.
Listen, the government is not going to do it at a federal level, but what will happen is states are starting to recognize that the states' economies were shut down without any justification. States were forced to support ridiculous interventions because of federal mandates without any economic support. And states are starting to realize that all of this was done because of something which is an actual very interesting old legal statute called the engaging in ultra-hazardous activities. It's actually a very significant criminal problem, and it goes back to some really interesting old UK laws. But the one here in the United States, Langham v. Velicopters, which is the famous case in the United States around this, says that if you willfully engage in an ultra-hazardous activity, you are actually liable. And if you do it as part of a conspiracy, it's a racketeering charge. And so what's happening is we're working with several states right now to actually develop state claims against the federal agencies for willfully engaging in ultra-hazardous activities which ultimately harm the states.
Oh,
they better do it all at once, because one by one they'll pick them off with some weird. Remember the guy that was suing in Texas? That was suing. All of a sudden, some weird smears came out about him.
So the attorney general in Texas.
Oh yeah, well, listen. I mean, that's the reason why we're coordinating this across a number of states right now.
Okay, so let me show you this. So this was the FDA doing a straight up commercial. Don't be shocked. You can now recharge your immunity with an updated COVID-19 booster.
I'm feeling low on immunity, Jimmy.
So that's from September 9th, 2022. Isn't so that to me looks like a straight up commercial for a big pharma product.
Yeah.
And there's no.
That is a straight up commercial, and that is a fraudulent, and that once again across the states is what's called a deceptive consumer practice. And under the Federal Trade Commission, it's called a deceptive medical practice, where you're actually willfully lying to the public to induce them to do something they would not otherwise do if you actually told them the truth. Nothing about these shots does anything to, quote, recharge immunity. What it does is it instructs your body, as I've said many times, to take the mRNA instructions and start making spike proteins, which are actually scheduled toxins by the United States government. So what you should be doing is recharging your, stockpile of biological weapons that you're manufacturing in your own body, because obviously no one has enough biological weapons floating around in their own body, so you need to recharge it every now and then.
Now, it looks like a battery from my iPhone, and I like iPhone, so I want to go recharge.
There you go.
Well, all I can say is there's no way what you're saying can be true, because the FDA and the CDC and the WHO has assured me that the spike protein and the boosters and the vaccine is safe and effective, and it will keep you from being seriously ill or hospitalized. And of course, you don't want to die, and it's safe for everybody, from babies to.
Well, and this is what I love about it. I mean, listen, it used to be back in the heady days of 2019 that the FDA actually had a published standard on what a vaccine clinical trial was supposed to be. Ironically, they actually published it, and it was actually a statutory thing. It was published as a statutory issue. And ironically, in the case of 2020, which for those who are not familiar with the calendar and how it progresses over time, 1 year later, allegedly, the clinical trials for allegedly what was called the COVID-19 vaccine was actually done where nothing about immunity was tested, nothing about transmissibility was tested, nothing about the ability to block infection was tested. The only thing that was allegedly scored, and I want to be very clear on this, scored was whether or not you actually got severe case symptoms of any problem. COVID itself was nothing more than a list of 11 symptoms, of which you had to have more than 4. So a committee had to decide whether you actually had COVID. There was no such thing as a test. There was no such thing as anything else. And in the clinical trials, if you actually read the FDA clinical trials, what you find is that the determination of whether you had a disease was actually subjectively determined by a board of medical professionals. I don't know about you, Jimmy, but when you're sick, I don't know if you need to have a committee come in and actually weigh in on, do you have enough chills to really call yourself sick, or are you just faking kind of not wanting to show up somewhere? We need to have a committee to determine whether you're actually sick. Because remember, at no point in any of the clinical trials was there a measure that said you actually, God forbid, had to have a lab test to confirm that you had something. All you had to do was have symptoms. And at no point in the clinical trial was there ever a measure of whether or not somebody actually had something that could have been associated with a pathogen. It doesn't exist in the clinical trial, in violation of the 2019 FDA published requirements on what a clinical trial has to include.
Well, what was the PCR test for?
Well, the PCR test was for the fear porn of pretending that somehow or another people could measure the existence or the absence of a response to what they said was a SARS-CoV-2 infection. But the problem that they had was that, unfortunately, the majority of people that actually allegedly had COVID, they said by symptoms, did not have any positive test. And the most people that had positive tests didn't have any symptoms. So the problem is, how do you have a disease which can only exist by symptoms? Remember, the World Health Organization was very clear. COVID-19 was defined by symptoms. You can't have it if you don't have symptoms by definition. But here's the funny thing. We had all these asymptomatic people coming around, allegedly, because the PCR tests were telling us that these people allegedly had SARS-CoV-2. Tiny little problem. They actually didn't. They amplified the cycle thresholds on the PCR test so much that they could determine that you had anything. You could have had a cat allergy and they would have found it, and you could have been a person living with 35 cats in your house having no allergy. The fact of the matter is the PCR test measured nothing associated with any disease. It had only an amplification of cycle thresholds for the purpose of the fear porn, getting the numbers up so everybody ran to get the shot.
So you're telling me, so what in the trials, you're saying they didn't, I know they didn't test to see if it stopped transmission or contraction, because a Pfizer executive admitted that when it was questioned at the European Parliament. And that's when we first found out they never even tested to see if it stopped transmission. And her response why they didn't was because she said they were working at the speed of science, which is a made up term.
Isn't that great? Speed of science.
It's
so
really
fast.
fast.
They went to plaid.
Say it again?
I said they went to plaid like Spaceballs.
Yeah.
That's what they did.
So what are you saying they did test for again?
Well, they didn't. That's the problem. The only thing that COVID-19 is in a medical defined sense, and the World Health Organization published this in March of 2020, COVID-19 is the set of symptoms. SARS-CoV-2 was supposedly the novel coronavirus. But here's the problem with both of those statements. Allegedly, the novel coronavirus was not novel. It was actually published in 2016, so we have that problem. And it was published by Ralph Baric at the University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill. So I don't know how you can get something novel in 2020 that was published in 2016 under the headline SARS Wuhan Institute of Virology Virus 1 poised for human emergence. I don't know about you, but when you actually say in the headline, Wuhan Institute of Virology Virus 1 is poised for human emergence, I don't think anybody could plausibly say that in 2020 we're surprised that something came out, given the fact it was published from UNC Chapel Hill in the unlikely, unfindable source, the Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences. So no one could have ever found it. It was so well hidden. Poised for human emergence in 2016, that novel thing, which we were told was the thing that was taking over the world in 2020, that novel thing was actually not novel. And the problem is that if you go and look at what was actually happening, Jimmy, in the clinical trial, if you had tested for the spike protein, which is the thing that makes you sick, then everybody who got the shot would have come back positive. So they could not test any biologic test at all in the clinical trial because, ironically, everybody that got the shot would have been making the pathogen that allegedly was supposed to be killing us.
So
the problem is you were actually doing it in your own body if you got the shot. So the bad news is everybody would have tested positive. So in the clinical trial, the existence of symptoms, and by the way, go back and look at the FDA record on this. The existence of symptoms and allegedly the severity of avoiding hospitalization were the primary clinical outcomes of what they called a vaccine. There was no measure of infection, no measure of transmission, and no measure of immune response officially in the large-scale clinical trial. There was none.
I just have to call you a liar. There's no way.
Why are you racist?
Why are you lying? Why do you hate black people?
I know. Why do I hate humanity so much?
Wait, Chapel Hill, weren't they? We did a story about how they're dicking around with viruses just like Wuhan.
They're still, yeah, we're going to get.
Oh, no, not just like Wuhan. Let's get it clear. In 2014, October of 2014, NIAID sent a letter to Ralph Barrick at UNC Chapel Hill during the gain-of-function moratorium telling him that the Wuhan Institute of Virology virus 1 spike protein coronavirus that he was working on in gain-of-function research was subject to the moratorium, and he was authorized to violate the moratorium by NIAID in October of 2014. In 2016, he published the paper, Wuhan Institute of Virology virus 1 poised for human emergence, which actually was the amplification of the spike protein. And at the end of the paper, there are two, not one, but two institutional review boards that were impaneled by UNC Chapel Hill. The first one was to measure the ethics of doing gain-of-function research on a known pathogen. And the second was to assess the ethics of violating the moratorium willfully by the university. So they actually had two independent reviews. This is, by the way, right in the final statement in the paper itself. If you go back and look at the 2016 SARS or the Wuhan Institute of Virology virus 1 poised for human emergence, at the end of the paper, they not only tell you all of that, but they also tell you that they actually took the Wuhan Institute of Virology virus, reconstituted it in Chapel Hill, and that's what they used as the gain-of-function platform. So all the nonsense you guys have heard about Peter Daszak and Ego Health Alliance and all that kind of stuff is a $3.8 million cover story for the $300 million story you haven't talked about, which is the DARPA and NIAID gain-of-function research at UNC Chapel Hill.
So you're saying, I mean, I'm
you're saying that you love Hitler and you want fascism to come to America. If I hear correctly, Jimmy.
It's all about fascism. It's all about, is there any way we can accelerate ourselves into the absolute, resurgence of the Fourth Reich? It's all about that.
I think we're well into it. It sounds like.
So you're saying.
There you go.
You're saying that they. So the story that I've been reporting, that Barack Obama put a pause on gain-of-function research, and that Dr. Fauci decided to go around that by doing it through a CIA cutout called Echo Health Alliance and sending it to Wuhan, and that's where this virus. You're saying that's a cover story.
That is 100% a cover story, and the evidence is mountains high, and we have been reporting on it. My first briefings on this stuff go back to 2014, and the fact of the matter is everybody who's fallen for the Eco Health Alliance story has fallen for the cover story for the agency.
And so what? So the real story is more damning than that? Because that seems horrible.
Oh, God, yeah. Way,
the real story
worse.
sounds like real dark shit.
Tell me, so the real story again is this guy, Ralph Barrick.
The real story is Ralph Barrick, who received a letter in October. By the way, all this is up on my X file. You can pull it off the X. The original documents are all there. But the October 2014 letter not only authorized the Wuhan Institute of Virology virus 1 to be weaponized at UNC Chapel Hill. I'm using the term weaponized specifically because in 2005, Ralph Barrick said that his work was synthetic coronaviruses biohacking for a, quote, biowarfare enabling technology. So that's the reason I'm using that term, because that's his own language. That was 2005. In 2014, when they got the waiver of the gain-of-function moratorium sent by NIAID to UNC Chapel Hill, in that letter, they actually added something that was not part of the original protocol, which was an in vivo application of the gain-of-function weaponization of the spike protein around the Wuhan Institute of Virology virus. By the way, they even thank Dr. Zhengli Shi at the end of the paper. They thank her for supplying all of the raw ingredients for the weapon. So this is not some sort of conspiratorial rant. It actually is, I don't know, something novel like literacy. Just read the freaking paper.
So you're you're saying that Ralph Barrick got a special dispensation to go around the pause that Barack Obama put. Now, is that leak? Well, I thought that Fauci works for Barack Obama, but he can overrule Barack Obama?
Of course he can. Of course he can, because he can do anything he wants. This was never a presidential or executive function with respect to the weaponization of coronavirus. In 2005, it was the DARPA MITRE conference where Ralph Barrick got the green light to turn what was then called SARS-CoV into a biological weapon.
And so this was manufactured, this COVID-19 virus.
Yeah, biowarfare.
What you're saying is a bioweapon by Ralph Barrick at the University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill.
Absolutely, that is published material. There's nothing in an allegation there. That's reading it right out of the papers.
And so why did they wait until late 2019 to release this? Is it?
Well, they actually attempted to get everybody to fall for this during the 2018 influenza season, which, by the way, at the time was the most lethal influenza season we had in the last 2 decades.
They had extra beds for that one.
I remember that they had beds in all the parking lots.
Musical beds for that one.
But they set up these. I remember that. In fact, I got sick that year. Horribly.
They put tents outside the hospital.
So go ahead.
Yeah, 2018 was supposed to be when it was going to happen, but here's the problem. The problem was people didn't fall for the flu shot. Tony Fauci cried to Congress. And so on September 18th, 2019, which for those of you, once again, not familiar with calendars, came well before the December date when we allegedly had patient 1 in Wuhan. On September 18th, 2019, the World Health Organization's Global Preparedness Monitoring Board said that there was going to be a, quote, deliberate or intentional release of a lethal respiratory pathogen so that by September 2020, the world would accept a universal vaccine.
Yeah.
So I think I saw that video. Is that on video?
Nope. That's a publication called World at Risk from the Global Preparedness Monitoring Board of the World Health Organization.
When did they have that fun zombie fight story?
So there was a video that I saw where there's 4 or 5 of these people, and Tony Fauci saying that, we have to make people afraid to make them.
Yeah, that video was actually preceding that. That was earlier in 2018.
Oh, okay.
Do you remember the war exercise about if there's ever a zombie apocalypse, and they were gaming it out, and it was like a wacky story, and it was like to teach them how to deal with pandemics. It came out right around then, and when you go back and look at, and I remember at the time. Yeah.
October 2019.
Yeah. And
it was called Event 201.
That's the Event 201 thing.
Yeah. And it sounded like kind of funny. I remember at the time, like, people like zombie. But all the details are like how you get the people in the camps and get them full of shots. And it's, I guess, the fear thing is why the zombie theme was.
Here's the question I have. So if you're saying that Ralph Barrick and DARPA under DARPA and Tony Fauci, they manufactured this COVID-19 virus as a bioweapon, it's not much of a bioweapon because it has a very high.
Remember, this goes back to the patent that was filed in 2002, which was the infectious replication defective clone of coronavirus. Infectious replication defective means a weapon. It means that it actually targets an individual, but it doesn't propagate. So what it means is you have to actually put it in people. That's what infectious replication defective means. Because a virus, a traditional sense of a virus by the traditional definition, is actually something that has to replicate inside of the human being. But what Ralph Barrick patented in 2002 was an infectious, meaning it gets into an individual, but it's replication defective, meaning it doesn't go through any natural transition of amplifying or actually propagating. That's the platform patent that Ralph Baric built so that SARS could become SARS. And remember, Jimmy, it's important to point out that that work, funded by Anthony Fauci in 1999, preceded the existence of SARS. He did not release SARS 1.0 until he had filed the patent on it the year before SARS 1.0. So this is an old game, not a new game. My first briefing of law enforcement intelligence communities was in 2002 on this particular biological weapon. And so I've been watching this thing as this slow motion Titanic wreck since 2002.
How do you know all this?
Well, that's my job. I know this about anything that exists anywhere in the world. My company, MCAM, underwrites every intangible asset in 168 countries, so we know everything.
Yeah, this is all below top secret information. That's my favorite part. All the crazy shit that the Pentagon in America does, that you would go, they wouldn't do that. Not only would they do it, it's not even classified. You just ain't going to see it.
So explain to me again why, if this was manufactured as a bioweapon, that it's not more deadly, right? Because it has a 99.7% survivability rate, right? And it only really affects old people.
It's a platform, though. You could add more stuff later, can't you? Once you install the mRNA.
Problem, Jimmy. So this is where the linguistics got all nonsensical in the first 3 months of 2020. So let's unpack a couple things. What people got was a manufactured synthetic spike protein, which was modified to actually have high degrees of symptomology and low degrees of infectivity, meaning that you get sick, but you don't transmit it to a bunch of other people, which is the reason why, as many people as want to do the anecdote about, but I was really sick in April of 2020 and I must have had something. Yeah, you probably had something. It was probably called the flu, or it was probably called the cold, or probably called something else. And you didn't actually have anything associated with this biological weapon until you got the shot, or until you got a PCR test. A lot of people seem to forget that in the first 3 months of this alleged pandemic, the CDC was accidentally shipping contaminated tests. Now, Jimmy, I don't know if you know anything about testing, but contaminated test is an oxymoron. You can't actually have a contaminated test unless it turns out that DARPA also funded and invested in a company that was co-funded by InQtel, which actually was a company that made test swabs which could carry lethal or sublethal agents. And that investment was made 3 years before this pandemic. So what you got was something you were exposed to, not something that you caught. No one caught COVID. No one caught SARS-CoV-2. And by the way, to this day, SARS-CoV-2 has never been associated with the existence of any disease at all. So, we can make up anything we want. The spike protein has been. The ACE2 receptor competition has been. But here comes the problem. The lethality count that we currently see in the normal population is because SARS, which we were told was deadly, is not. And it turns out that all kinds of coronavirus versions of models exist, and none of them are deadly. So let's get clear on that. But the shot, which was the mRNA injection, happens to be extremely lethal. And what we will see over a period of time is that its lethality is going to grow. What we saw in the first instance with the spike protein expression was things like clots, cardiovascular diseases, and so forth. Not surprisingly, because in 1999, you heard that right, 20 years before SARS, in 1999, Ralph Baric figured out how to make coronavirus infect heart tissue. That's why Anthony Fauci loved him so much. That was the project that got Ralph Baric the seat at the table as the bioweapons expert on coronavirus, because he actually figured out how to make a gastrointestinal associated viral model go into what became a cardiac targeting device, which is what he did in 1999. If you fast forward, what you find out is that the spike protein has a very inflammatory response to cardiovascular tissue, and we've seen a lot of sudden death, and we've seen blood clots, and we've seen a bunch of things around that. But the nasty piece, far worse than the blood clots in the spike protein, is the fact that in the shots to stabilize the mRNA, they used a thing called pseudouridine, which is a synthetic nucleic acid substitute, which is put in the shot to stabilize the mRNA. And the bad news about that is in 2018, once again, a couple of years before all this nonsense got going, pseudouridine was identified as a pro-cancer agent. You heard me say that correctly, pro-cancer. And it worked through two mechanisms. One was the natural suppression of your body's ability to fight cancer. And the other was it actually turned on metastatic disease where you had latent cancers, which is the reason why you see so many people who are discovered having stage 4 cancer. Stage 4 cancer is metastatic disease, meaning that it's going elsewhere in your body. And here's the problem. The problem is in 2018, we knew that pseudouridine was going to do that, and it was put in every single shot that went into every single person's arm. Now, it's a slow motion death, but the fact of the matter is a vast majority of what we realize to be the mortality and morbidity data around the shots, we have only begun to see the real death counts, but the real death counts are coming.
Why would they do this?
To kill people.
Overpopulation, you know?
What does Anthony Fauci get out of killing?
Well, he gets hundreds of millions of dollars of undisclosed royalties, which now inconveniently for him are showing up in the financial statements of Moderna and will soon be showing up in the financial statements of BioNTech. So the hundreds of millions of dollars, where, by the way, in the fall of 2020, Congress asked for an investigation into the economic recovery that was going to come to NIH and NIAID for the proposed treatments that they were recommending. And cunningly, Anthony Fauci and NIH, Alex Azar, sitting at the head of the Department of Health and Human Services, lied to Congress and did not list a single one of the patents that they held on what became what we call the vaccines. Despite that, what we have is the companies manufacturing them paying hundreds of millions of dollars of royalties to NIH for patents that were never disclosed to Congress in the official request Congress made in the fall of 2020. So you can go back and look at that response from HHS to Congress. You can go back and look at the Inspector General's review, and lo and behold, you were not told that any of them were going to enrich themselves off of that. But let's take the second piece of your question, which is, okay, why? Go back to 2011, when the Gates Foundation and the World Health Organization got together and said that they were going to declare the decade between 2010 and 2020, what they called the decade of vaccines, in their publication and in the material that Bill Gates did in public presentations surrounding that publication. His goal was to reduce the global population by approximately 10%, which is his number that he stated in public. Now, not good with math, but last time I checked, 10% of 8 billion people is 800 million people. Greater than the sum of all recorded wars of all of human history. And their goal was to eliminate 800 million people from the surface of this planet.
So,
That's why you call it a soft kill.
Even for me, this seems too diabolical to be true. I mean,
are you being serious?
Yeah, it sounds.
But Jimmy, this is the point. Plato wrote about this in the Republic. he actually said, and I'm going to use one of my favorite comedian spin-offs on this is Eddie Izzard, who actually spun off Plato when he said, that in Plato they call them temple robbers and grave robbers and everything else, but Eddie Izzard does a really cute bit where he says, if one person kills one person, it's murder, we get indignant. If one person kills 3 people, we call them a serial killer. If one person kills 10 people, we make a Netflix documentary around it and go inside the mind of the killer. And if one person kills 100 people, we start marveling at how did they pull it off. But when we actually cross another threshold, and this is what Plato talked about, when the egregiousness of the crime becomes too unimaginable at scale, we actually have no moral consternation at all.
I do. I believe it's on purpose.
You mean
100%?
You mean like in war?
Yeah, or how many of us really know what Pol Pot did in the killing fields?
So,
how many of us really know what Pinochet did in Argentina? How many people really know how many people really died under Stalin?
Or under us in our last 2 devil sacrifice wars.
Right. Well, I mean, look.
Here's the problem. The problem is once we start talking about millions of people dying, right? Our brains can't handle that. If 1 or 2 people die, we're sad. If 10 people die, we're not 10 times sad because we don't have the human capacity to 10 times sadness. And if 100 people die, we can't even wrap our head around it. But if 100 million people die, that's more than all the wars we know of.
So this is a diabolical plot by Bill Gates and the WHO and DARPA? That's what you're saying?
And the World Economic Forum and everybody who has decided there are too many people on Earth.
Remember the Georgia Guidestones?
And so they decided there's too many people on Earth, and they've been
saying it for years.
I know
they've been saying that for a long time. This goes back to the 1913 Carnegie Foundation's eugenics program.
Yeah, and the Rockefellers, and then that scumbag chick that formed Planned Parenthood, who was a Nazi, and the goal is to kill. And she said it in those words. That ain't right-wing propaganda. This crazy bitch said it.
So
they've been wanting it for a while.
So I'm gonna guess you got your booster.
Hey, my immunity feels low. I'm down to 2 bars of immunity.
So
I am very thankfully non-genetically modified.
I am. I got the first 2. I got the
goddamn Pfizer.
I got the Moderna. Now Moderna is it true that the first product they ever produced was the COVID-19 vaccine?
Yeah, and it's worse than that. They didn't really produce it. The VRC, Kizzy Colbert, who is the celebrated African-American biologics expert at the VRC at NIAID, is the one who allegedly got the formula from Ralph Barrick to actually start making these things. And she has a lovely interview where she talks about how easy it was to do. She uploaded it onto her computer one night, was making it the next day. Terribly fascinating. Makes you feel really good, by the way, about that, knowing that nothing could ever go wrong. I don't know if you've ever had anything go wrong with a computer uploading or downloading a thing, but thank God that didn't happen that night, because otherwise we'd all be screwed. But the fact of the matter is, Moderna, most people don't know, was actually a 10-year National Science Foundation project from 2000 to 2010 called Darwinian Chemical Systems. Hey, Jimmy, Darwinian Chemical Systems.
Yeah.
You know what?
Yep, there you go.
Darwinian Chemical Systems?
Yeah,
These
people believe in Foundation grant that actually started Moderna.
Yeah, Darwinian.
And so they never produced a product, and the first product they produced just happens to make $100 billion. What is it? Wow, how lucky can you get, right?
Well, you got a great product.
Well, the great news is it's not only lucky, they have no liability for it. They have absolute immunity from the fact that anybody who got sick or ultimately will die from it, they have absolute immunity from all of it, except for what I'm doing right now, which is actually in the process of piercing that immunity.
So I'm going to show you this. This was recently happened in Congress. Congressman Massey had, now this is the former head of the FDA, Dr. Krauss.
Yeah.
And so he's some kind of whistleblower or something, but let's watch. I just want to play this for you and we'll talk about it.
I'd like to show a video that Pfizer produced. This was an ad for I believe it's for the boosters, maybe.
You know that unwelcome guest everyone wishes would just leave already? That's COVID-19. That's why I got the new updated booster, designed to help protect against recent Omicron variants. Got it?
Okay, that's good. Given that they weren't, this was an EUA product, is there anything missing from this ad? Does that seem like a compliant ad to you?
Well, normally advertisements of products include some disclaimers, of course, in places you go for more information or a suggestion that one talk with one's physician and so forth. So it does seem like something is missing here.
I'm going to ask you, Mr. Siri, was the FDA, not Dr. Krauss, but was Dr. Marks aware of this video? And isn't his, not within Dr. Krauss's subdivision, but within a subdivision under Peter Marks, aren't they responsible for policing these things? And did Dr. Marks know about this ad?
Absolutely. Our firm sent a letter to the FDA about this advertisement and others, including on Sesame Street, pointing out that they do not comply with the federal regulations and the federal law, because even the EUA itself issued for the Pfizer COVID vaccine said that any time the EUA product was going to be promoted, there was a disclaimer that must be put on it saying, this has not been licensed as safe and effective. But nonetheless, that disclaimer, you do not see it on that advertisement. And when we pointed out to the FDA, they did not do anything about it. Even worse, the CDC itself actually violated the rule by promoting the vaccine as safe and effective when it was EUA. And we wrote a letter to the FDA saying, are you going to enforce your rules against the CDC? And the FDA never took action.
Wasn't it the case that in 41 videos, Peter Marks himself, the person in charge of vaccine approval, was making claims that were not vetted by the FDA, and in fact would have been illegal for the manufacturer to make, yet the regulatory agency was making those claims?
And I'm not aware of any exception that would have permitted the FDA itself to violate a regulation, or I believe, or the United States Code in which it was that particular disclaimer is derived from.
Thank the gentleman from North.
So, first of all, Martha Stewart is not a samurai. Samurais have honor. They would have gut themselves before disgrace. She is a Ronin and just honors the highest bidder. So just so you know that. So what they're saying there is that commercial, that was made by the FDA, and the FDA was violating its own regulations because
correct.
The booster was still under emergency use authorization, and that's what they're saying.
Yep.
And so they didn't run it. They're supposed to run disclaimers saying that, and they didn't.
Listen, every drug, Jimmy, that you've ever seen advertised on television has a whole list of this may cause dizziness,
anal
limbs
leakage.
might fall off.
Yeah, and then you show a guy washing a boat, and he's like, "What are you saying? Something? I'm trying to wash a boat."
Yeah, trying to wash a boat.
Wait, I heard something about blindness. Hey, I got a boat.
And so here is the Sesame Street commercial.
Yeah.
I learned that Elmo getting vaccinated is the best way to keep himself, our friends, neighbors, and everyone else healthy and enjoying the things they love.
Oh, Daddy! Oh, Elmo and baby David have a question. Can we have a hug?
Oh, come here, son.
Elmo loves you, Daddy.
I love you.
It's his dad?
It's okay to have questions about COVID vaccines for your kids.
Is it?
Get the latest facts by speaking to your pediatrician or healthcare provider.
$7.50 a head they were making, right? That was their bounty on sticking that in your kids?
Well, it's worse than that because pediatricians were getting paid as a percentage of the kids in their practice groups that were getting shot. So you actually got incentivized based on the percentage of children that got the shot. And somehow mysteriously, nobody bothered to point out to any parent that the spike protein seems to not only localize, but actually aggregate and perpetuate in reproductive organs. So the great news is not only are we going to have our children exposed to the high risks of cardiovascular disease and cancer, but we're also going to do everything we can to make sure that they do not have the capacity to reproduce.
Well, that's an old dream. That's a dream they've had for quite some time. So yep. Between that and then the giving them a gender affirming hysterectomy at a young age, we got every possible Nazi way to sterilize people, the useless eaters, I guess you call us.
I got to tell you, I was not ready for this.
I thought you already knew this.
No, I mean, I didn't know like this. No,
it gets much worse.
I thought that there was
things. Jimmy, we've scratched the surface of this. We've got 68 other pathogens that are ready for deployment.
Okay.
Cut his mic.
Okay. Okay. Can you stick around for one more I got to load in one more segment, something about bird flu.
Hey, Jimmy.
Yes.
You know what you're doing? You know what you're doing right now, which is really good. No, it's really good. You're actually doing what every normal person should do when exposed to this kind of information, because this is the evidence of a moral compass, an ethical framework, all of the things that are lacking from the public discourse. And what you're doing right now is a massive, massive service to everybody who's watching this, because this is the feeling. The feeling you have right now is the feeling that we should have, so that we can actually recognize that the people who are doing this are actually not making oversights, accidents. This isn't a mere clerical error. This is premeditated. This is malice aforethought, and this is criminal acts. And what you're doing right now is what all of us should be able to do, which is to go, oh my God, it's a lot worse than I thought.
I mean, I bought the Echo Health Alliance thing. I bought that this,
total cover story. That's all bullshit.
Remember you thought Cornel West was real? Look, I'm into way crazier shit than this is. Don't even faze me. Like we cover just regular news of the evil. Like, these people are despicable. If they were at least like lizard people, that would explain it a little better. Like, that would actually, okay, I get it. They're lizards. That's what. But just the regular stuff we cover every day. Of course they would do this. Why would they not do this?
So you're saying you Barack Obama is aware of all this?
No question. He was not only aware of it, he was briefed on it at the beginning of his presidency by the people who bought his presidency.
Codename Renegade.
And so we've covered excess deaths here, right? So we know that story, and we know that people are dying at 10 to 40% higher rates than normal, and that's not being reported in the regular pharma-funded news. And when I bring it up to people, I go, "Hey, you should look into excess deaths." They look at me like I got two heads, and so
that's the mind control part.
So I know that what we've been doing has been causing excess deaths. But I didn't know it was intentional. I thought that, this was just some scam. But you're saying,
Jimmy, let's go back. No, let's go back. Let's go back for something. Remember, remdesivir, Ralph Barrett made it with Anthony Fauci's money. And let's just play for slow motion just to get this into our heads. The World Health Organization pulled it from clinical trials in Africa because it was killing 53% of the people who got it, killing them. And in the study that the World Health Organization used to pull that drug, they said that it was killing people regardless of viral load, which means that healthy people who had no Ebola were being injected with remdesivir and killed. 53% fatality rate from the drug. The World Health Organization said it was too unethical to use in Africa for Ebola trials, and Anthony Fauci sat next to the president in the spring of 2020 and said, let's use remdesivir for COVID. The World Health Organization said it was too deadly to be ethical.
So first of all, it sounds deadlier than Ebola.
It is deadlier than Ebola. There's nothing that has a 53% kill rate.
So you're
that is naturally circulating.
So I knew Anthony Fauci was evil.
Well, I just touched a thing where he experimented on foster kids.
Yeah, and I know he experimented on foster kids with AIDS stuff.
But you think he draws the line at?
But this seems, this is like Pol Pot, Hitler, Stalin.
Yeah, it's above his head.
It's like combined, right?
It's the people in charge is above him.
Way, way, way past all of them.
They're worse than any criminal in human history.
So that's what I've been saying. Even if the cover story was true and he funded the EcoHealth Alliance, which created the COVID, and then you say all the deaths that came, so he's responsible for that. Even if the cover story was true, but you're saying it's way worse, that it's actually intentional. This is hard.
It is.
Okay, so hang on.
So in 2015, Peter Daszak said, to get the public to accept the need for medical countermeasures, such as a pan-coronavirus vaccine, we need the media to create hype. We need to use that hype to our advantage to get to the real issues. Investors will respond if they see profit at the end of the process. That statement was made in 2014, published in 2015 in the Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences. That is a statement of domestic terrorism, a statement of racketeering, and a statement of coercive intent to kill human beings. And it was published in the Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences. Jimmy, this is not an accidental slip up of overzealous people like Gates. This is a premeditated murder of humanity. Hey, that is what it is.
So there's no way I can drop this video on YouTube.
Hey, remember? I'm
not kidding. Like, there's no way.
I mean,
they'll take my channel down. So, are you getting this message out other places?
Yeah, 4 billion people have seen my European Union speech, which I did at the European Union Parliament. It's the most downloaded video in human history.
And where was that? Where is that?
It's up on X. It's up on Rumble. It's up on BitChute. It's up on everything that can keep it up. And ironically, Google keeps trying to take it off of YouTube, and it keeps showing up. So,
okay, all right. Over to Steph for a minute.
Okay, for a minute. All right. Problem we have is with grown men and women being very good boys and girls. Our problem is not civil disobedience. Our problem is civil obedience. Howard Zinn. Thank you for that, SS. SS presidents are quasi-kings, clowns, supposedly. We got away from the autocracies, of Europe. But no, we're just doing a watered-down version of it because we can't imagine not being told what to do by one central person.
Okay.
All right, back to Jimmy.
So this is the former CDC director, Redfield, and this is what he had to say about the bird flu.
I'm obviously most worried about bird flu. Right now, it takes 5 amino acid change for it to be effectively infecting humans. That's a pretty heavy species barrier. But this virus is already now in 26 mammal species, as you saw most recently, cattle. But in the laboratory, I could make it highly infectious for humans in months, because it's been published, the 5 amino acids that I need to change. And so I don't think that research should be done. That's the real threat. That's the real biosecurity threat, that these university labs are doing these bio experiments that are intentionally modifying viruses. And bird flu, I think, is going to be the cause of the great pandemic, where they are teaching these viruses how to be more infectious for humans.
So here it is. The U.S. is collaborating with Chinese scientists to make bird flu strains more infectious and deadly as part of a $1 million project, despite fears similar tests unleashed COVID.
Despite fears? Could that have been what caused it?
It gets worse, too. There's a company called BEI Resources, which is a company funded originally by the Rockefeller Foundation, now owned by NIAID, where you can buy H5N2, which is the bird flu virus that allegedly is running around the world infecting innocent people right now. You can buy it from their catalog, Jimmy. H5N2. When Redfield says that he's worried it might be available, yes, it is. It's sold in a catalog by BEI Resources. That's like saying that you might get, I don't know, Craftsman tools from Sears and Roebuck. No kidding. It's already there and you can buy it.
So what was Redfield doing there? What is your guess at
supporting the same cover story that everybody fell for with coronavirus? He's pretending like this is actually a possible lab leak story. And it's not a lab leak story. It is the commercial release of a known scheduled pathogen that is for sale right now at BEI Resources. You can buy it.
Hey, when do we drop the new variant? Remember that Texan English guy?
Yeah. So here's Dr. McCullough, who got everything right during COVID, as far as I can tell. Of course, he was immediately...
Well, except he kept calling it a vaccine when it was officially published in the Securities and Exchange Commission filings by both Moderna and BioNTech Pfizer as an experimental gene therapy. And as many times as I've said so, every time people say COVID vaccine, I sit there going, you're just promoting their BS cover story.
Well,
this was an experimental gene therapy, and it should never have been called a vaccine by anybody, including people like Dr. McCullough.
So I've been referring to it as that, and that it's not and I had to remind people they literally in the dictionary had to change the definition of what a vaccine is, and that it was they in their own documents, as you prove, I was privy to this, that they refer to it as a gene therapy. So
yep, exactly.
So here's what he says. So I got afraid. I saw Dr. Redfield. I'm like, oh my God, they're going to do this again. But this one was probably going to be deadlier, because I saw another video of him where he said that it has a 25 to 50% death rate, the bird flu. He said it will. And I'm like, so if one out of every two people are probably going to die if they get this, why would they be allowing them to be doing this? Why wouldn't he be screaming about it instead of talking about it in such dulcet tones? And then I see Dr. McCullough, and he says this.
I mean, one of my patients told me for sure that they're coming on farms with hazmat suits, doing mass PCR testing of healthy animals. All that's going to do is raise a false case count and create orders for mass culling.
So let me ask you this, Doctor. What do you think's going on? Because it's right before an election. They're trying to pass a UN treaty. They're hyping it. They want people to wear hazmat gear. It looks like a rerun of 4 years ago to me.
I would predict we're so ready for this, Alex. We know that iodine, nasal sprays, and gargles work fine. Wellness Company, we expanded our contagion kit. We know that Tamiflu and hydroxychloroquine work fine, started early. So we have this so well covered in humans. We shouldn't lose a single human with this. I don't think there's going to be a threat to mankind. I think this is a giant threat to the food supply, because the response is this elective mass destruction of livestock. What I think should happen is I think we should get rid of all of this perfunctory testing and let the animals get through it. They'll get through this fine. We need an investigation to the gain of function research. It probably is being spread around by mallard ducks. I mean, it's in that duck population. It even spread to a dolphin off the coast of Florida. So I can tell you, it's in migratory.
Sure. So let me ask you this. I mean, obviously, though, they're rolling it out now for a power grab. It doesn't really affect humans. It's a bunch of hysteria. Knowing the bad guys trying to cover up the last evil thing they did with COVID, they need a new story to cover it up. We talked about this years ago. I disagree if you think I'm wrong, but then if you're in the enemy's brain, what do you think they're going to pull next?
They want mass vaccination, Alex. They want mass vaccination. We know that CSL, a company, Sequarius, has the audience vaccine. It's an antigen-based vaccine. They developed it with BARDA, a research unit of the military. FDA cleared it in 2021 with no human data. Now they have pre-purchased enough vaccines for the entire country. Right after this antigen-based vaccine, Alex, they have a self-replicating messenger RNA vaccine. CEPI, the international organization with the Koreans, they have a self-replicating messenger RNA vaccine. I think the end game for the bad guys is mass vaccination.
So what do you say to what he's... So it seems like it's not deadly, just like COVID-19 wasn't for healthy people, and that we could get through this with iodine washes and gargles and hydroxychloroquine. What do you say to all of what he said?
Yeah, well, listen, what he just laid out is absolutely correct. This is manageable. It's not going to kill people. It will kill people through fear and the fear response to get injections, and the injections will kill people. There's no question about it. Bill Gates said that over the next 5 years, every platform is going to be an mRNA platform. That means every one of them is going to be pro-oncologic, meaning it's going to stimulate cancers, and we're going to see epic levels of death from that. The only thing that's going to harm humanity from bird flu or any of these things is the fear response humans have to the propaganda and the willingness to take countermeasures which are going to kill people. What Peter did bring up, which is actually very well worth pointing out, is the attack on the food supply is absolutely a real problem. And it's part of the longer game about getting behavior control and behavior modification. When you control the food supply and you control the monetary supply and you control health and movement, you have a acquiescent population. And so anything that humans can do to not engage in the fear porn that they're trying to do around this thing is going to be helpful. But I think that Peter is right, and I think Alex's comment and his commentary is spot on. They're doing this in run-up to another election where we have to have the equivalent of the martial law we had in 2020, where you couldn't stand in lines without 6 foot distance, and you couldn't have public debate. You couldn't have conversations with people. You couldn't do any of the things that are part of a normal functioning democracy, and they're trying to do it again. And all I have to say is don't fall for it. It's not legit. It's not real. And nobody is going to die except from the interventions that are taken.
So he said they already have a vaccine, but then I see this. And this is from July 2nd. It says U.S. pays Moderna $176 million to develop a bird flu jab. The U.S. government has given Moderna this money to an mRNA pandemic influenza vaccine that would work against bird flu. It says it wants to be better prepared for public health crisis, having learned lessons from COVID. Bird flu is not a big threat to people despite outbreaks in poultry and cattle, but experts want a working vaccine that could be quickly rolled out in case the virus mutates and becomes a problem. Vaccines using mRNA technology, which the Moderna COVID jab is also based on, can be produced more quickly. And the U.S. government says adding this technology to its pandemic flu toolkit enhances its ability to be nimble and quick against bird flu. This strain has been around for years in birds, but some other animals, including cattle, have become infected in recent outbreaks. Some believe the virus might one day change and start spreading easily among humans with potentially serious consequences. So far, there is no sign of this. One more slide. In people, the virus can cause symptoms ranging from mild illness, such as nothing, to potentially fatal disease such as pneumonia, according to the CDC. So if they already have a vaccine, that's what Peter just said, McCullough, Dr. Peter, what are they doing? What is Moderna doing?
Increasing the number of cancer cases that you're going to see 3 years from now.
This is nuts. I can't.
I'm moving out of California, so everybody's crazy and armed, and they at least be some kind of something will happen there. Here, it's the biggest. People are so stupid here. By the way,
so there's already. Okay.
Oh, remember 2008?
So, but the mRNA vaccine tech platform has no long-term studies, right? In fact, that there was never...
Nope. As a matter of fact, not only it has no long-term studies, the first time we're going to see the first clinical data off of this study is in 2027, Jimmy. 2027.
Off of what study? This study?
off of the COVID study, because the COVID study doesn't get complete until 2027.
You know, if they experimented on all of us with it.
You mean the study for the COVID-19 vaccine?
Yeah, that one doesn't end until 2027.
Whoa,
and so what happens?
Speed of science has slowed down some.
So what happens when that? So they're going to get another EAU for the bird flu vaccine, you think?
Well, they'll get an EUA for it, and guess what? People will take it, and more people will die. And this is the point. We need to actually, as I've said many times, I said this on Alex Jones a couple weeks ago. This is the weirdest war I've ever seen where people run into the line of fire and get shot.
So you mean
the pun is fully intentional.
So you mean go in to get this the treatment, the vaccine?
If you get an mRNA injection right now, you are actually playing Russian roulette on the best of days, and you're playing Gettysburg's charge on the worst of days. Don't do it.
Hey, you remember when the good guy? Remember it was called the Good Club. Things in the Guardian. It was after 2008. All the greats, all the Bill Gates, Soros, Oprah. Do you find the articles about how they got together to figure out how to save the world? But then the Giving Pledge came out of that.
Yeah.
And then that's when they said vaccines. In fact, I just went back and looked at the article again. It's all about how we got to get this vaccine thing going.
Yep.
So this is
and
right after people were mad.
2010 was declared the decade of the vaccines.
Yeah,
That's
they were
why
mad about the housing crash. And that's when all the oligarchs said, hey, we got to kill a lot of these people. The Good Club. They met before that Bilderberg group. And it got a lot of press. And it's hilarious to read it back then. Bill and Melinda are still together. And they're all talking about how we have to worry about these vaccines, et cetera, et cetera. And then, you know, women racism in Russia, of course.
So I don't want to show you. This is the last thing I'll show you, and I'll let you go. This has been.
I've got 5 minutes, Jimmy. So
this has been Affleck's daughter giving public comment recently. I think this is. Here we go.
Hi, Violet Affleck, Los Angeles resident, first-time voter. I'm 18. I contracted a post-trial condition in 2019. I'm okay now, but I saw firsthand that medicine does not always have answers to the consequences of even minor viruses. The COVID-19 pandemic has thrown that into sharper relief. 1 in 10 infections leads to long COVID, which is a devastating neurological cardiovascular illness that can take away people's ability to work, move, see, and even think, stands to exacerbate our homelessness crisis, as well as the suffering of many people in our city. It hits communities of color, disabled people, elderly people, trans people, women, and anyone in a public-facing essential job the hardest. To confront the long COVID crisis, I demand mask availability, air filtration, and far UVC light in government facilities, including jails and detention centers, and mask mandates in county medical facilities. We must expand the availability of high-quality free tests and treatment, and most importantly, the county must oppose mask bans for any reason. They do not keep us safer. They make vulnerable members of our community less safe and make everyone less able to participate in Los Angeles together. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
No, I just say, imagine a cross-country drive with Ben Affleck's daughter. How many states you think you could survive before you open the door and just tumble onto the freeway?
I mean, did Ben drink when he was pregnant? She's a moron.
I mean, I wouldn't get into that car to begin with. Remember, everyone and everything is dirty, and hell is made of crazy. And here's Ben.
Here's Ben after his amazing
By the way,
daughter.
Someone tweeted this out. That's Ben Affleck smoking underneath his mask. Can you believe that? Is that him doing that? That's it?
That is just crazy.
The mind virus is fully taken over Hollywood. Why doesn't them just get vaccinated? He's using the proper pronoun. I thought Jiggly was the worst thing he made until I saw this.
Salty cracker, that's a good one.
So anyway, any last, I just wanted to show that to you because that was.
Hey, are you worried we're losing our democracy like I am?
This is.
Yeah, government wants to
democracy,
kill you.
The illusion of democracy has been overrated for a long time, and I think it has been lost. I think we're in the process of gaining back something that will one day get us back on track to a civil society that actually has civil and society and principles and ethics and morality. And the fact of the matter is conversations like this help advance it. So that's what I care about.
Okay. So do you, I can't get over what you told me today. And anyway, so why are you afraid?
I smoked.
Are you afraid Are you afraid for your life at all? Because, I mean, they even came at me. They used Pegasus, which, again, that's not an individual. That's a nation. That's a state. That's the CIA. Yep. You are afraid?
No, not in the least.
Why is that?
You got your booster, that's why.
Because I've been through this more times than I can count. Remember, I was the one that was asked to lead anthrax investigations in September 2001. That was not a very popular thing to do in the Bush administration when it turns out we released anthrax on the U.S. population from the U.S. government. My first congressional testimony was 1983. I was 16 years old, Senate Armed Services Committee testimony. I've been doing this so long, and I've had so many people who tell me that there's all kinds of problems. And I'll tell you what, the fact of the matter is, my one speech in the European Union Parliament did more to destroy the World Health Organization's momentum than probably anything else. And I sit every day knowing that conversations like this are the ones that have the power, because it is enabling people to be informed, and an informed population has the ability to transform itself. So I'm not worried one bit. The fact of the matter is, we're going to prevail. We are prevailing. And the battle plans we have in terms of the legal actions we're taking are things that are going to actually advance the cause of humanity. And that's what I'm going to continue to do.
I mean, it's very brave of you, honest. That's no joke. But, you're talking about people who are slaughtering people on mass scale. Why wouldn't they just take you? Why wouldn't they?
Well, it turns out that there's a bunch of countermeasures about how my company and my actual personal life have been organized, where, let's just say, if I was not contained in this mortal frame, I'd be a bigger problem.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, look, it's not that easy as to take somebody out who said a thing, because they pile up. Boeing, they're piling up over there.
Yeah, they take them out. All right, Dr. David E. Martin, I really appreciate you taking time. And should I direct anybody to something that you want them to see?
Just make sure that I try to stay visible on X. I try to stay visible. My wife and I do a lot on fullylive.world. So check it out. And Jimmy, thanks for taking the time. It's an honor.
Thank you. Right back at you. Okay. Over to Steph.
All right. Thank you so much. Really appreciate your time. See you in the future.
All right. Bye-bye.
Okay, thank you, Jimmy. All right, here we go. Maxine Waters wanted her hair parted, not on the right, but on the left, a signal to loyal Democrat Party voters. Cool Blue, 71. Hopefully, Dr. David Martin will emphasize that COVID-19 was not new, that scientists have been working on weaponizing the cold virus since the 1960s. Thank you for that.
I do want to show you this. Can I show you this, Kurt?
Oh, yeah, I have stuff for that.
Did you know that Will Smith's Chris Rock slap was all based on an old movie scene?
No.
Solidus 183.
No.
Surviving Biden 2024 Vienticus. Thank you. Someone
think he didn't slap him still?
No.
He did slap him. He did.
Yeah,
slap him.
he did.
I spoke to Chris Rock. He slapped him.
Yeah. Someone needs to stop this. This is reminding me of my grandfather fading away. Please, BRICS nations, forget your differences and acknowledge your common enemy. Please humble this empire. Chiliabop. Thank you, Chiliop. Did you know? Oh, I wrote that one. Solidus. Don't even leave a patch called Ukraine, lest it remain a NATO playground, carpetbaggers, money laundry, and becomes a BlackRock property. Sparky, Putin's actually reasonable and righteous man. Poisoning, etc., blamed on Putin were false flags carried out by CIA.
Did Sputnik kill people, though?
And Five Eyes and their associates. Say it again.
Is Russia's vaccine? Because all these countries made everybody take vaccines. So it seems to me like ain't none of these people your friends.
No.
Seems like they're all like...
I mean, Israel, right?
It seems like only poor idiots think of their country as like a country and don't understand it's cut up in a way that they don't put on the map for you to see. You know?
People were really upset that Africa wasn't getting vaccinated at the rate that they should. You ready?
Yes.
Back to Jimmy.
I just can't get over...
that it would be this nefarious?
And that the people didn't even have the slightest bit of curiosity.
Why would they?
People who do shows called Government Secrets had zero
curiosity. Exactly. Nobody knows that show.
I know. That's what I'm saying. You know why? Because they totally repeated the big pharma.
That's the job.
Propaganda.
Look, there's people pretending Biden is not senile right now, and because they're getting paid to. That dude that went on Joe Rogan, who I like the dude, he's on my thing. He went on to refute what I said about Israel. I told you that. He got paid.
Of course he got paid.
Yeah. He didn't smear me. He could have been like, oh, Kurt's a real anti. But he's like, no, I like him, but he's just wrong about this. It's paid. Everybody's getting paid.
Justin Coleman, what's his name?
Coleman Hughes.
Coleman Hughes, that's his name.
Can I just read this?
You're saying he got paid?
Everybody gets paid to go. So when you hear people say stupid shit that doesn't make sense, they're not dumb. They're getting paid. The other people are what's called mind controlled. You heard about North Korea. You think your country don't do it? They do it better.
So Sherelle says, I thought this was an interesting chat from Sherelle. Why would they want to kill the most compliant?
Oh.
There's just too many of you. Do you not read Yuval Harari the way Obama does? There's a new remember the promise of technology? We're going to have everything done for us, right?
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden they go, oh, now we have this technology. Now you're useless.
Useless eaters.
Oh, that's weird. I thought that we were all going to have a better future because they're like, no, it's like, bad news. It turns out you don't serve a purpose.
And you think getting rid of the food supply, why Bill Gates is buying all the farmland and all that.
Bill Gates sells fake meat.
And you think
that he wants us to eat by 2030. We're not hitting his goals.
Fake meat and bugs, right?
Look at everything in position. The bullshit BLM thing. All these things are all position. People are like, oh, they can't control the world. Boy, it seems like they're controlling a lot.
Isn't it something how BLM just went away?
Yeah, well,
they just went away.
A stripe on the gay flag.
Yeah.
He did it.
They just went away. And they got
feminism went away. Everybody's thing went away.
They got Juneteenth.
You get an extra barbecue day.
They got nothing. They did nothing. They accomplished nothing. They did nothing.
And now illegal immigrants are taking funding that would have went to blacks in the inner city. Yeah, no, you didn't matter. It turns out none of us matter. In fact, we matter in that there's too many of us here and they want us all. A lot
and
of us dead.
that was a.
Alex Jones has been right about every single thing he said so far.
How it feels to chew 5 gum. Gum. Stimulate your senses.
Well, let me tell you. Boy, the brain, shut it down.
I were Rabbi Shmuley and diddle 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 digga digga diddle diddle dum. All day long I'd diddle little bums. If I were a Shmuley man, I'd peddle all my dildos, dreidel dildos, selling dildos with my daughter and her mum. If I were a Jewish Shmuley man, I'd be digging with a dildo in my bum. I'd wear a grotesque nose and go grab some goyim right on the nipple with a pinch. A Shabbos lap dance brace for the youngest mensch.
At this time, more than any other time, you know, revolution is necessary. It is necessary. Not only based on what has happened with the MOVE organization, you know, the babies that have been murdered, you know, MOVE adults that have been murdered, bombs being dropped on us, but past that to what is happening with all black people, so-called minority people, you know, money poor people. You know, this government, as has been said earlier, has waged war on us. But you know, something about us, particularly here in America, we don't really understand that. You know, we don't really know what war is. You know, for black people, for poor people, that people see as good, that they wasn't forced to do, that they didn't do to try to keep black people appeased, you know, and calm down so that black people wouldn't riot. A prison situation is a crystallized example of that. You can make phone calls in prison. They have movies in prison, but they don't have those things because they just want to be nice to prisoners. They have those things because they know damn well if they don't have, you know, people being able to contact their family, if they don't have, you know, facilities for people to sit there and watch movies, people are going to be frustrated, upset, and they're going to direct that frustration at them prison administrators, and they're going to have riots on their hands. You know, they're going to have people in them prisons turning them prisons out. That's why they have movies. That's why they have access to phones the way they do. And a stop to it when we don't like it, or encouraging it when it's something that's in our interest. You know, we have to call the shots. The people have to take the reins of this system and start dictating, you know, what we need, what needs to be done. And, you know, taking the initiative to do it ourselves. We can't rely on this system. I mean, you know, don't people see what's happening? Every single confrontation that MOVE people have been involved in, every single issue, you know, oppression, economic issues, every single issue facing our people, you know, is something that can be dealt with very, very simply. All people got to do is make their wishes known. All people have to do is stand up and say, listen, we're not accepting that. Unity is the key. Unity is the key to revolution. Revolution ain't nothing to be afraid of. It ain't nothing to shy away from. Revolution, contrary to what officials, you know, this system and those backing the officials running this system, you know, want people to believe that revolution means violence, you know, means blood in the street. I'm saying it can get to that point, but it don't have to be violent. You know, when people come together and take a strong stand on an issue, this government don't have no choice but to listen. Where you think they get their authority from? They don't have no power, but they do have authority to do certain things. Where you think they get it from? They get it from us, from the people. You know, they get it from us accepting the things that they do to be done to stop it. Then you have some people who want to then turn around and say, yeah, well, you know, it's the best we have, and want to make excuses. The time for excuses is over. It's over. You know, every man, woman, and child has to be involved in this revolution. Not only has to be, but is, whether you want to be or not. I mean, our babies gave their lives for this revolution on May 13th. You know, men, women, and children were murdered. And not just MOVE babies, you know. What about all of the young men, women, you know, children 8, 9 years old shot down on the street by cops, you know, by drug pushers. I mean, you know, where do you think that mentality comes from? It comes from this system, from the mentality of this system of getting over, you know, making a quick buck, you know. I'm saying that's where that needs to be done to stop it. Then, you know, what I want people to really, really understand is that it's past time. It is past time for poor people, black people, you know, to realize that this system has failed you. It has failed you. You can't get nothing from it. And what people got to do is withdraw our support from it and start doing for ourselves. That's what we got to do. You know, how long are people going to sit back and beg, you know, this government to do what's right when for hundreds of years all you've gotten is a slap in the face? All you've gotten is this government kicking your ass. That's all. That's all black people have ever gotten from this government.
Hey, thanks for checking out our YouTube channel. Subscribe by clicking on that button down there for more AM Joy and the rest of MSNBC. And click on any of the videos right here to watch the latest interviews and highlights. And you can get more videos from MSNBC for free every day with our newsletters. Just visit